Alpha King was dragged from a raging river by Omega, then asked why the current protected her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to Lydia Hart. The storm had broken over Silverwilds just before dusk, leaving the Nightfall River churning with cold foam and flashes of silver light beneath its surface. Lydia stood at the water's edge with her basket of herbs clutched to her chest, thinking she should turn back before the current grew stronger. But something in the air felt different, a quiet pull, a hum she couldn't name. She whispered to herself that she was simply imagining things, the way Omegas often did when left alone with their thoughts. Yet her steps slowed, drawn toward the river as if it murmured her name. She wasn't supposed to be this close. Everyone said the Nightfall River had a will of its own, choosing who it welcomed and who it rejected. But Lydia had never feared it. It always felt strangely gentle near her, even on its wildest days. She crouched by the bank, brushing aside strands of wet hair, just as a distant crack split the air. Her heart lurched. Upstream, near the old wooden bridge, a dark figure stumbled against the rail. She saw only a cloak at first, heavy with rain, then the sudden splinter of wood as part of the railing gave way. The figure fell, vanishing into the rushing water without even a cry. Lydia froze for a single breath. People vanished in this river every year. Strong wolves, skilled swimmers. If she shouted for help, it would take too long. And the river was already dragging him toward the deepest stretch. Her pulse hammered. She dropped her basket and ran, boots slipping on wet soil, her breath sharp in her chest as she sprinted along the bank, keeping her eyes on the flash of dark fabric tumbling in and out of the foam. She didn't think about rules or rank or the way people end. Her pack laughed whenever she tried to help. She thought only, he's alive, and he's running out of time. When she reached a bend where the water carved close to shore, she stepped into the icy rush. The cold struck like a shock, but the current didn't yank her under. Instead, it curled around her legs, steady, almost warm beneath the surface, guiding rather than fighting her. She waded deeper, stretching out her arms as the figure drifted closer. Hey, I've got you, just hold on. Her fingers brushed his sleeve. The river lifted him just enough for her to grip his arm and pull with all her strength. It felt impossible at first, a weight she shouldn't have been able to move. But the water shifted, rising beneath him like a gentle push, helping her drag him toward the bank. When he finally collapsed onto the grass, rainwater pouring from his cloak, Lydia knelt beside him, breathless, confused at her own courage. The river behind her softened its roaring, settling into a calmer rhythm, as if satisfied with its decision. She pushed wet hair from her face and leaned over the stranger, whispering, "You're safe. I've got you." And for the first time, she wondered if the river had always known she would answer its call tonight. Lydia stayed kneeling beside the stranger, her hands hovering uncertainly as he lay still on the grass. Rain softened to a drizzle, the world settling into that quiet space after danger has passed, but before understanding arrives. His breathing steadied, warm against the damp air, and for a moment she simply watched the rise and fall of his chest, grateful he was alive. When his eyes finally opened, they were a startling shade of silver, bright even in the dim light. He looked at her as if searching for something familiar in her face, something he had lost in the river. Lydia straightened, brushing mud from her palms, her voice soft. "You fell from the bridge. You are safe now. The river let you go." He blinked, clearly disoriented. "You pulled me out." She nodded, though her heart thudded because his gaze felt sharper than any ordinary man's, as if he saw straight through her simple Omega life and into the parts she tried to hide. He pushed himself up carefully, and she instinctively steadied him with a hand on his arm. His cloak was heavy with water, the fabric rough beneath her fingers, and he inhaled sharply at the touch as if surprised by the warmth of her grip. "You should rest," she said gently. The current was strong. Anyone else would have been swept away entirely. His expression shifted, thoughtful rather than fearful. "And yet you walked into it," he murmured, studying her. "It moved for you." Heat climbed her cheeks, and she lowered her gaze. I do not know why it did that. It just felt calm. Calm. He repeated, as if testing the word. His eyes drifted toward the river, where the surface still rippled softly, almost peacefully, as though pleased with their survival. Lydia wished she understood it herself. She had always sensed things others did not, small shifts of water and wind that meant little to anyone else. She never told anyone. Omegas were expected to be quiet, unnoticed, grateful for scraps of approval. But the river had responded to her, and that terrified her almost as much as it comforted her. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and forced herself back to the moment. Can you stand? There is a clearing up the hill where the ground is dry. You should not stay in the cold. He hesitated before accepting her hand, rising with a steadiness that surprised her for someone who had just been swept through rapids. Even soaked and pale, he carried himself with a presence that felt larger than the space around him. She noticed then the intricate clasp on his cloak, a design of silver metal shaped like a wolf's head. It looked expensive, far beyond what any traveler would own. What is your name? She asked quietly as she guided him toward the path. A long breath left him, and something unreadable flickered in his silver eyes. Rowan, he said. Nothing more, though the name rolled through the air like thunder held in restraint. Lydia repeated it in her mind, steadying him when he stumbled on a patch of uneven ground. The rain eased further, clouds parting just enough to let moonlight touch the river in a shimmering line. Rowan paused, glancing back at the water once more. The current should have taken me under, he said quietly. Instead, it slowed. It softened, as if it was trying to keep you safe. Lydia felt her breath catch at the words. She opened her mouth to answer, but Rowan was already watching her with that same searching gaze. A gaze that made her feel the night had shifted in a way she did not yet understand. And for the first time, Lydia wondered if saving him was not an accident at all, but the beginning of something the river had known long before she did. Lydia guided Rowan up the narrow slope, careful where she placed her feet on the damp grass. The storm clouds were breaking apart, revealing faint stars scattered across the dark sky. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, a quiet reminder that Silverwilds always held its breath after a storm. Rowan moved with surprising steadiness beside her, yet she could sense the strain in each controlled breath he took. She kept glancing at him, worried he might collapse again, but his posture remained firm, almost regal in the way he held himself despite his exhaustion. When they reached the clearing, Lydia paused beneath a tall cedar tree. Its wide branches shielded them from the lingering drizzle, and the ground here was softer, warmed by layers of old needles. She brushed debris aside to make a dry patch for him to sit. Here, she said gently, lowering her voice as if the night itself might shatter. This is better. Rowan sank onto the ground with a quiet exhale, bracing his hands behind him. Moonlight slipped across his features, revealing sharp lines and a steadiness in his expression that felt older than his years. He watched Lydia as she knelt in front of him, inspecting a scrape on his arm. You do not need to fuss, he murmured, though there was no irritation in his tone. You nearly drowned, she replied softly. Let me help. Her fingers brushed his sleeve, and he stilled, studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. It was not unkind, just searching. Lydia drew back slightly, tucking her hands into her lap. I should ask where you were going before the bridge gave way, she said. Travelers do not usually cross these woods during storms. He hesitated, as if weighing how much truth the moment could hold. I was heading north, he answered at last. There were matters that needed my attention. Lydia waited, sensing more behind his words, but he did not continue. Instead he shifted, looking again toward the river glinting through the trees. The way the current behaved, he said quietly. I have never seen anything like that. Lydia followed his gaze, her voice barely above a whisper. It has always been gentle with me. Rowan tilted his head, his silver eyes reflecting the faint light. Rivers do not choose favorites. She wanted to agree, but the memory of the water rising beneath her feet, lifting instead of pulling, lingered too vividly. Maybe it was only chance, she said, though even she did not believe it. Rowan offered a small, thoughtful hum, the sound low and warm. The kind of sound that suggested he had seen enough of the world to know when something did not fit into simple explanations. A breeze drifted through the clearing, carrying the scent of the river and the faint rustle of leaves. Lydia wrapped her arms around herself, the chill settling along her skin. Without a word, Rowan unclasped his cloak and draped it over her shoulders. She blinked, startled. "You will be cold," she protested. "I am fine," he said, and there was a certainty in his voice that left no room to refuse. The weight of the cloak warmed her instantly, smelling faintly of cedar and rain. Lydia pulled it closer and dared a small smile. Rowan watched her again, softer this time, as though seeing something he had not allowed himself to acknowledge until now. "Lydia," he began, her name careful on his tongue. "People do not walk into raging rivers. Not unless something inside them already knows the river will not harm them." Her breath stilled. "I did what anyone would have done." "No," Rowan said gently. "You did what only you could have done." A quiet settled between them, the kind that felt like the moment before truth rises to the surface. And in that hushed space, Lydia wondered if the storm had washed more than rain across Silverwilds tonight. It had brought a stranger to her feet, a river that seemed to listen, and a feeling deep inside her that something in her life had just shifted forever. Lydia felt the weight of Rowan's cloak around her shoulders like a quiet promise, shielding her from the lingering chill of the storm. The clearing had grown softer under the moonlight, the shadows gentler now that the danger had passed. Yet something in Rowan's gaze held a different kind of intensity, a steady focus that made the night feel suddenly more awake. He sat with one knee drawn up, observing her as if each small movement revealed something important. Lydia smoothed the edge of the cloak, trying to settle her thoughts. "I should walk you to the village," she said. "You need warmth and a place to rest." Rowan lifted his eyes to hers, steady and unreadable. "And leave you alone in the woods at night? That is not something I would allow." His tone was calm, but there was an underlying certainty that made her breath pause. "I have lived here my whole life," she said gently. "I know these woods better than anyone." "Even so," he replied, "you pulled me from a river that should have taken us both. I will not have you wandering unprotected." The word unprotected lingered between them, warm and unfamiliar. Lydia looked away first, focusing on the tree line shimmering with moisture. She was not used to anyone worrying about her. Omegas were expected to worry about everyone else. Rowan shifted his weight, testing his strength as he rose to his feet. Lydia stood quickly in case he needed support, but he seemed steadier now, his balance firm. "You are sure you feel well enough to walk?" she asked. "Well enough," he answered softly. The moonlight brushed the edges of his silver eyes, revealing a calm depth beneath the surface. "And I trust your judgment about where we should go." The word surprised her, simple, yet carrying a weight she was not accustomed to receiving. She hesitated, then nodded toward a path that curled around the cedar roots. "There is a small cabin nearby," she said. "It is not fancy, but it stays dry. My aunt used it during gathering season. She will not mind." Rowan gestured for her to lead the way, and Lydia stepped into the narrow path, keeping her pace slow so he could follow comfortably. The forest floor was damp but quiet, the storm's energy lingering only in the faint scent of rain. As they walked, the river hummed distantly, as if tracking their steps. Rowan noticed it too. "It sounds different now," he said, "as though it is watching." Lydia felt a shiver trace her spine. It has always had a strange voice after storms. "Not strange," he murmured thoughtfully. "Attentive." She glanced over her shoulder, unsure how to respond. Rowan's expression held no fear, only a patient curiosity, as if the world around them was revealing pieces of a puzzle he had expected to find. The path opened into a small clearing where the cabin stood, its wooden walls darkened by years of wind and weather. Lydia approached the door, pushing it gently. It opened with a soft creak, the interior cool and faintly scented of dried herbs. Rowan paused behind her, taking in the space with a careful sweep of his gaze. Lydia stepped inside first, lighting a small oil lamp on the table. Warm light filled the room, chasing the storm's shadows away. Rowan remained at the doorway for a long moment, watching her with that same quietly searching look. "You move as if you belong to this place," he said softly. Lydia smiled, uncertain and shy. "It is simple, but it is home." Rowan stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "It suits you," he said. "Calm, strong, unexpected." His voice was low, almost thoughtful, as if he had not meant to say it aloud. Lydia felt warmth rise in her chest at the unexpected compliment. She looked toward the lamp to steady herself, but she could still feel Rowan's gaze, calm as river light and just as deep. And standing there in the small glow of the cabin, she wondered if the night had brought him to her by accident, or if the river had carried him exactly where he was meant to be. Lydia set the lamp on a small wooden table, its warm glow softening the shadows that clung to the corners of the cabin. The familiar scent of dried sage and pine drifted through the air, grounding her even as her thoughts spun. Rowan stood near the doorway, his tall frame outlined by the faint silver of moonlight that seeped through the cracks in the shutters. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet settled around them like a blanket, gentle yet charged with something unspoken. Lydia cleared her throat softly. "There should be blankets in the chest by the window," she said. "You can rest here for the night." Rowan approached the chest, lifting the lid with careful hands. The simple motion revealed an ease in his movements that felt at odds with the near drowning he had just survived. He selected a blanket and turned back toward her. "You are very kind," he said. "Most people would have left me where I fell." Lydia shook her head, brushing her fingers along the edge of the table. "I could not have done that. I saw someone in need. That is all." Rowan watched her closely, as if every word she spoke revealed something larger. The gentleness in his silver eyes surprised her, easing the small knot of nerves that had gathered in her chest. He folded the blanket over one arm and stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Still, kindness is a choice. And you chose to risk yourself for a stranger." Lydia's breath hitched slightly. No one spoke to her this way, not with earnest gratitude or sincere attention. She lifted her chin, trying to steady the flutter beneath her ribs. "It was not bravery," she said softly. "I just moved before thinking." "Sometimes instinct is wiser than thought," Rowan replied. His gaze softened even more, especially when instinct protects life. A quiet warmth spread through her at the words. She offered him a small, shy smile before stepping past him to check the shutters. They rattled faintly as the wind shifted, though the storm had mostly passed. "The nights grow colder after rain," she murmured. "If the breeze becomes too strong, let me know. I can adjust the shutters." Rowan nodded, but his attention remained fixed on her. Lydia felt his gaze like a gentle touch, steady and aware. She pretended not to notice, focusing instead on the lamp's flame as it flickered against the glass. "You should sit," she offered. "You must still be tired." Rowan lowered himself onto the bench by the table, the blanket resting across his lap. Lydia took the opposite side, folding her hands together to keep them from fidgeting. The silence that settled between them felt different this time, not awkward but thoughtful, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Rowan broke the silence first. "Earlier, by the river, when you reached for me, the water changed." Lydia hesitated, her heartbeat stumbling. "I know," she whispered. "I felt it." "You were not afraid," he observed. "Most would have been." She searched his expression, unsure what answer he sought. "I just wanted to help," she said. "Nothing more." Rowan leaned forward slightly, his tone deepening with quiet conviction. "You did more than help. The river listened to you." Lydia looked away, unsure how to respond. The idea felt too big, too strange, like a story whispered by children around a fire. "Maybe it was only the storm easing," she said. But Rowan shook his head slowly. "No. Something answered you. I could feel it." Her breath trembled, the truth pressing against a door she had kept shut for years. She had always sensed things others did not, always felt the world in ways she could not explain. And now, someone else had seen it too. Rowan's voice softened. "Lydia, the river did not protect me tonight. It protected you." Her eyes lifted to meet his, and the quiet intensity there made her pulse quicken. For the first time, she wondered if the night had not brought him to her by accident, but because the river had been waiting for her to discover who she truly was. Lydia felt Rowan's words settle into the quiet cabin like a ripple across still water, subtle yet impossible to ignore. She drew a slow breath, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table as she searched for an answer she did not fully understand herself. The river had listened to her. He had seen it. And the truth of that recognition made her pulse tremble beneath her skin. Rowan watched her closely, not with suspicion, but with a patient kind of certainty, as if he had expected this moment long before she ever reached into the current for him. "Lydia," he said softly, "has anything like this happened to you before?" She hesitated, her gaze drifting toward the shuttered window where moonlight leaked through thin cracks. Small things, she admitted quietly. When I was a child, the water at the creek would rise when I played near it, but only around my feet. I thought it was just imagination. And during dry seasons, when our pack struggled to find enough water, I could sometimes sense where the ground felt alive. Rowan's expression deepened with interest, a thoughtful intensity settling into his features. Those are not small things, he murmured. Those are signs of a gift. Lydia shook her head quickly, her heart fluttering. No one else sees it. And Omegas are not supposed to have gifts. We are meant to be quiet, helpful, forgettable. Rowan leaned forward slightly, his voice steady and warm. You are anything but forgettable. The words caught her off guard, gentle and sincere. Heat rose to her cheeks, but she did not look away this time. Instead, she studied him, noticing the way the lamplight softened the sharp lines of his face and the calm confidence in his posture. He seemed to belong everywhere and nowhere at once, a man shaped by more than the world she knew. A faint gust of wind slipped between the shutters, brushing against the lamp's flame and causing it to flicker. Lydia stood to secure the window, but Rowan rose with her, instinctively stepping closer, as though prepared to steady her if the breeze grew stronger. She met his eyes for a brief heartbeat, the closeness making the small cabin feel even smaller. Thank you, she said softly as she adjusted the latch. I just do not want the wind to blow the flame out. It feels safer with the light. Rowan nodded, his voice dropping to a gentle timbre. Light follows you, Lydia. Even the river recognized it. She returned to the table, unsure how to carry so many unexpected truths in one night. Rowan remained standing for a moment longer, studying the room before joining her again. His movements were quieter now, smoother, as if the warmth of the cabin had coaxed strength back into his limbs. You said earlier that you sensed the river changing, he said. Did it frighten you? Lydia considered the question, folding her hands together. Not exactly. It felt like recognition, as though the river saw me in a way people do not. Rowan absorbed her words slowly. Then you are stronger than you think, and the world around you knows it, even if your pack does not. Lydia felt her breath catch, the truth of his statement landing deeper than she wished to admit. Her pack never saw her. Not like this. Not like Rowan did. Rowan glanced toward the window again, listening to something only he could hear, before his attention returned to her. Lydia, he said, there is something I must tell you, but I do not want to startle you. Her heart fluttered. What is it? Rowan stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm, carrying something important beneath the surface. You deserve to know who I am, and why the river reacted the way it did. The room seemed to still, every sound softening into anticipation as Lydia realized. The night had been leading to this moment from the very beginning. Lydia's breath caught in her throat as Rowan's words settled between them, heavy with meaning. The small cabin felt suddenly too quiet, the lamplight too warm, as if the air itself sensed a shift. Rowan stepped closer, not threatening, simply present, his silver eyes steady on hers. You deserve the truth, he said softly. All of it. Lydia nodded, though her pulse fluttered like a trapped bird. She had known he was different the moment she pulled him from the river. His bearing, his strength returning too quickly, the way he read the world with a depth she had never seen. But hearing him say he had a truth to reveal felt like standing at the edge of something she could not quite see. Rowan drew in a slow breath, his voice calm. My name is Rowan Hale. In the Northern Territories, that name carries weight, more than I sometimes wish it did. Lydia searched her memory. She had heard the name Hale before, whispered among pack members when they spoke of powerful leaders and faraway lands. A name spoken with a mix of awe and caution. Rowan Hale, she repeated. Why does it sound familiar? Rowan held her gaze, his next words gentle but certain. Because I am the Alpha King of the Northern Territories. The room did not move, yet Lydia felt the world shift beneath her feet. Her breath stilled, her mind racing through every moment since the storm. She had dragged a king from the river. She had offered him shelter. She had sat across from him, speaking freely, unaware that every pack in the north bowed at his command. You are. She swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. A king. Rowan gave a small nod. Yes, but tonight, I was simply a man who needed help, and you were the only one who answered. Lydia took a step back, overwhelmed. I did not know, she whispered. I would never have. You would have. Rowan interrupted gently. That is what matters. His voice softened even further. You did not see a title. You saw a life worth saving. Lydia steadied herself against the edge of the table, trying to gather her thoughts. A king. She had been alone in the woods with a king. And the river, whatever strange thing had happened, had unfolded. Right in front of him. I should bow, she said, panic rising in her chest. Rowan moved instantly, closing the space between them with a calm firmness. No, he said. Do not bow to me. Lydia froze, startled by the quiet power in his tone. Rowan's expression gentled, warm and sincere. Lydia, tonight you met me as a person, not as a throne. That is rare, and I do not want that to change. The words wrapped around her like a steadying hand, calming the storm in her mind. Still, questions pressed forward, tangled and urgent. Why were you alone? Why were you on that bridge in a storm? Rowan exhaled slowly, leaning one hand on the table beside her, though not invading her space. I was returning from a council in the mountains. There were threats along the borders, and I traveled quietly to avoid drawing attention. The storm struck faster than expected. When the bridge gave way, I thought that was the end. His eyes softened as he looked at her. Until you. Lydia's heart tightened. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Rowan's gaze dipped briefly to the cloak still wrapped around her shoulders, then lifted to meet her eyes again. There is one more thing you should understand, he said, his voice lowering. The river did not slow because of me. It slowed because of you. And I have seen enough of the world to know that such things do not happen without reason. Lydia felt the room grow still, her pulse loud in her ears. Rowan's next words brushed over her like a quiet revelation. Lydia Hart, he murmured, the river recognized you long before I did. And with those words, the night seemed to lean in, as if waiting for what she would do next. Lydia stood very still, her fingers curling around the edge of the table as Rowan's words echoed through the quiet cabin. The river recognized you long before I did. The sentence felt impossibly large, too immense to hold, yet something inside her responded to it with a quiet tremor of truth. She lifted her eyes to Rowan, uncertain, bracing for disbelief or doubt, but his expression held neither. Instead, he watched her with a calm steadiness that made her feel seen in a way she never had before. Rowan, she whispered, I am just an omega. A river does not choose someone like me. Rowan shook his head slowly, the faintest hint of conviction in his voice. Titles do not define your nature. Strength is not decided by rank. And what I saw tonight was not an accident. Lydia felt the air thicken around them, the lamp's golden light flickering as though listening. She swallowed, unsure how to navigate the sudden weight of her own existence. My pack never noticed anything, she murmured. They only saw someone quiet. Someone who should stay out of the way. Your pack does not see what the river sees, Rowan replied gently. And it does not see what I see either. Lydia's heart fluttered in her chest, a small, fragile motion that somehow steadied her. She pulled Rowan's cloak a little tighter, its warmth grounding her. What exactly do you think I am? She asked. Rowan stepped closer, careful and deliberate, as though giving her every opportunity to retreat. She did not. His voice softened. I believe you carry a bond with the natural currents of this land. A rare one. Something that has been gone from the northern territories for generations. Lydia searched his eyes, seeking any trace of exaggeration, but found none. Only sincerity and a quiet awe. You speak as if I am something important, she said. Rowan's expression changed subtly, something warm blooming behind his silver gaze. You saved my life, Lydia, and not just by pulling me from the water. The river obeyed you. It listened. That alone would make you important. Lydia felt a gentle shiver pass through her. For so long, she had been invisible, a shadow dwelling in the corners of her pack's world. Hearing Rowan speak of her with such certainty felt like standing for the first time in a doorway she never knew existed. She shifted slightly, letting her hand rest on the table's smooth surface to steady herself. If what you say is true, she began softly, then why have I never felt anything this strong before? Rowan considered her question, his brow softening. Because gifts like yours awaken in moments of instinct, not comfort. The river moved for you because your heart moved first. His voice lowered, almost reverent. You acted with pure intention. That is what called it. Lydia breathed in slowly, the truth settling into her chest like warm light. Rowan took one more step toward her, close. Enough that she felt the quiet strength radiating from him, yet not so close as to overwhelm. Lydia, he said quietly, I have traveled through kingdoms where rivers run wild and storms speak louder than kings. I know when nature bends. And tonight, it bent for you. She felt the warmth rise again in her cheeks, but she held his gaze. Her voice trembled. I do not know what to do with any of this. Rowan's answer came gently, with an ease that felt like the first calm after a storm. You do not have to know, he said. You only have to let the truth come to you, the way the river did. And in the stillness that followed, Lydia realized the night had shifted again, not toward fear, but toward understanding, as if the world was quietly opening a path that only she could walk. The cabin held its breath as Lydia searched Rowan's face, trying to understand how a single night could shift the shape of her entire world. The river's whisper still lingered in her thoughts, soft and steady, as though it waited for her to claim something she had spent her whole life ignoring. Rowan remained close, not pressing, simply anchoring the space with his quiet presence. His silver eyes reflected the lamplight, warm instead of sharp, and the gentleness there steadied the tremor in her chest. Lydia, he said softly, there is something else I need to tell you. She felt her breath catch, though she nodded for him to continue. He drew a slow breath, choosing his words with care. When the river slowed, I felt something. A pull, not toward the current, but toward you. Her heartbeat stumbled, warm and unsteady. Before she could speak, Rowan continued. I have lived long enough to know the difference between instinct and fate. What happened tonight was not instinct. His voice lowered, deep and certain. It was something older. Lydia shook her head faintly, overwhelmed. I do not understand. Rowan stepped closer, close enough that the warmth of his cloak brushed her arm, though he still allowed her space. You may not see your own strength yet, he said gently. But the river did. And so did I. Lydia's throat tightened. No one had ever spoken of her, as if she mattered, as if something in her held weight. She had spent her life in the quiet corners of her pack, trying not to draw attention, trying not to take up space. Yet here stood the Alpha King, speaking as though she had been chosen by the land itself. Rowan, she whispered, I am not sure I am meant for anything extraordinary. A faint smile touched his lips, warm and unexpectedly soft. Extraordinary things rarely feel extraordinary at first. Lydia looked down at her hands, tracing the faint outlines of droplets that had dried on her skin. They shimmered faintly in the lamplight, as though the river's touch had left a memory behind. Rowan noticed too. There is something more, he murmured. A bond beginning to form. Her breath trembled. Between the river and me? Rowan's gaze deepened. Between you and something far greater than the river. Lydia lifted her eyes, confused. What do you mean? Rowan exhaled, the sound quiet and steady. There are stories, he said. Tales of waterbound omegas who could calm storms, guide rivers, and sense the living currents beneath the earth. Legends say the land chooses them when danger is near. Lydia felt a chill roll down her spine, not from fear, but from recognition. Those are only stories. Most legends begin as truth, Rowan replied. And tonight, I watched the river answer your call. Lydia stared at him, unsure whether to run from the enormity of his words or step into them. Rowan held her gaze, steady as the moonlit earth beneath their feet. Lydia Hart, he said with quiet certainty, you may be the first waterbound omega in a century. The lamp flickered, the shadows swaying like gentle waves. Lydia felt the truth settle inside her with surprising calm, as though a piece of her life she had never known was missing had finally returned to its place. Rowan's voice softened again. Whatever comes next, you will not face it alone. I promise you that. Lydia inhaled, the air cool against her skin, her pulse steadying. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint murmur of the river as if echoing Rowan's vow. And as the night wrapped around them, Lydia felt something she had not felt in years. Light rising in her chest, quiet and certain. Hope, steady as water finding its path.